Hello and welcome to Analysis. I'm Jonathan Steele. A fortnight ago, over 4,000 residents of the London borough of Southwark were called to a mass court hearing over refusal to pay council tax. This has been the largest of a number of mass hearings that have taken place in England after the universal council tax benefits were stopped in April this year. As a result of the changes in Southwark, thousands of residents with little or no income at all were required to pay 15% of their council tax bill. From April, local councils have had the authority to decide what the local rate of council tax should be, and many poverty and debt groups have criticised Southwark Council for not absorbing the debt, as many other councils in Britain have done. When Islam Channel contacted Southwark Council, they told us in a statement, "Southwark Council has been the 11th hardest hit council by government cuts across the whole country. If we wrote off the debt of those who haven't paid their council tax, inevitably we would have to take the money out of another squeezed council service. Court action is a last resort for us, not something we relish, but relatively small missed payments for individuals of as little as £2.50 per week would add up to a big hole in the council's budgets for the coming years if we did nothing about this." That's their statement. Well, with me to discuss the implications of this move in Southwark and elsewhere, and discuss the effect of these changes on vulnerable people across the whole of the UK, are Nick Golderberg of the debt advice charity Zaccheaus 2000, and Jon Glackin of the London Street Foodbank. Let me come to you first. You were in court, in Camberwell Magistrates Court, when this happened. I mean, what happened? 4,000 people turned up?
It was a couple of hundred of the summonses came up. Most people had been advised by advisory charities and by Southwark Council not to attend. I also would like to take issue with the point that court is the last resort. Many of the people that did turn up were very clear that they were making payments by direct debit regularly and on time, and they were up to date. They've now been slapped with the liability order that means that any deviation, any error on their behalf or by any other person will mean that they are unable to negotiate a further payment plan. There were really vulnerable people, terrified.
Well, they got letters saying they had to appear in court even though they'd been paying regularly.
The letters actually had about a third of the front page was you must not attend court, you should not attend court. And so that council were advising for weeks beforehand for people not to turn up. Everyone was advised, if you don't turn up, there won't be additional charges. If you do turn up, there'll be worse consequences for you.
So that was misleading. So
very misleading.
People who didn't turn up actually were penalised.
And undermining one's legal right to sort of have one say in court.
Right.
Very often I went with a client to the front of the queue. We met with a council officer who said, "Oh, it's all right, we'll make a payment plan now. No need to see the magistrate." We would then ask, can we have a hearing? We've got a barrister standing by who could help our clients. And the officer would say, "No, we're not having any hearings at the moment." And they would make some people wait 4 or 5 hours, and they would eventually give up. You can't expect someone, just because they've got a council tax summons, to give up the rest of their day. If it's in the morning.
What happened to the people who did actually go into the courtroom and got a hearing?
The majority of the people that went into the court with our legal team did get an adjournment. Very often there were genuine cases where they had already been making payments, they were entitled to discretionary relief, or indeed the order had been incorrectly, the demand notice had been incorrectly applied. People were making payments, people were on top of their debts, and this was a punitive action by Southwark Council.
And why is Southwark Council doing this? I mean, we heard the statement, but it is a Labour council. They are criticising the government's universal tax credit abolition thing. So why are they then, their own council, a Labour council, doing this?
I think Southwark Council get one thing right, it is a political choice, and it's also a political choice by Southwark councillors. It's their choice to enforce the debt on the poorest and the most vulnerable. whilst many other councils, 18% nationwide and 6 specific councils within London, are keeping 100% council tax benefit reductions. So people, the poorest in each of those boroughs, are paying nothing for their council tax.
And are those all Labour councils or even some Tory councils?
It's a mix. For instance, the Tri-Borough, which is Hammersmith and Fulham, Kensington and Chelsea and Westminster, all Conservative councils are all keeping 100% discount on council tax benefit. And it is a political choice, and it's wrong to say that the poor should bear the brunt of these cuts when there are, in every part of London, there are well-off people who are willing to bear the brunt of the cuts in order to protect the vulnerable, the sick, the disabled and the poor.
Well, John, tell us about the situation in the rest of London. I mean, it's not just the housing benefit that's been cut, of course, it's a whole lot of benefits. Legal aid is one of them as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we're discussing about people who are being brought as criminals because they're paying an unjust tax that up until April they didn't have to pay, but now they have to. But now they have to go as innocent people to a courtroom with no legal representation other than advocates, people speaking on behalf of. The only way they actually can get some legal redress is if they're convicted. If that they lose, you have to pay this council tax, and then we can get legal aid and we can actually go, no, actually, we were right in the first place. We've had 2 trials. You're wasting money. The whole thing is, I don't know how it can be viewed as a cost-cutting exercise. And they say it's part of the Tories' reform of the benefit system. You know, reform in my book is...
Well, you say, how can it be called a cost-cutting benefit? It is actually cutting costs, but isn't it at the expense of very poor people who are...
Absolutely.
But it is from the government's point of view, they're allegedly saving money, are they? Or you think they're not even saving money because of all the enforcement costs that go with it?
I don't know. I would like to know. Where is that money going? I mean, for example, I know there's going to be this winter, and it's probably going to be a hard winter, there's going to be 4,000 less shelter beds, emergency shelter beds across London this winter.
Why is that?
Why is that? Because councils say they can't afford it, because Westminster said they can't. I don't know. And people now are being made homeless because of the council tax, but there is no support. We don't have enough beds to house people in emergencies. Now you're trying to make more people homeless.
But I mean, the charities are still, helping homeless people. It's just that they got more and more people they have to help because the councils are dropping out. Is that it?
Absolutely. To compare within Z2K, Zaccheaus 2000, where I work, by the whole of last year, we had 1/3 as many cases as we've seen already this year, and that's only the people who come to us.
This is for shelter.
For homelessness issues, for debt issues, for loss of benefits. I agree with John that it's not saving money in the long term. When you cut council tax benefit for the poorest, they economise in other areas because they're advised that it's a priority debt and they should put council tax over heating or eating, and that's wrong. When child benefit is cut for an arbitrary reason, when the disability benefits for long-term degenerative conditions are cut, people take money out of their housing benefit, then they end up homeless, they have nowhere to go, the council has to step in, and the costs escalate. It would be so much easier and wiser for people to pay, for councils to decide on 100% council tax benefit so that it's completely reduced, and that would free up more money in this time of increased inflation as prices surge on every single thing. This is the time where a political decision needs to be made nationally and locally to support the poorest.
Well, what is the Labour Party doing? I mean, you pointed out that Southwark, although it's Labour, is just doing exactly what the Tories want them to do. Is the Labour Party nationally, do you think, doing enough to combat what the Tories are doing?
I think nationally all the parties, and not just the big three, are they are very sort of one mind when it comes to welfare reform. The poor must be punished. To claim benefits is a sin. It's all very laden with language. When you hear Ian Duncan Smith or any Conservative or Liberal Democrat minister talk about the poor, it's laboured with sort of morality, and it's wrong. It's really, really wrong, and it's giving in to the lowest common denominators about how we should treat the weak, the vulnerable, the needy. It's something that I and all of my colleagues are horrified by.
Well, John, I mean, what is your view of what Labour is doing? Why are people sort of frightened by the concept of welfare, as though it's a vote loser if you're in favour of helping the poor?
Well, in my opinion, the Labour Party, much like the Tory Party, posture, they come out with words. I mean, I thought it was a shame to the Tory Party whenever David Cameron said food banks are now a wonderful idea that came from them for a big society, we're all helping each other. The shame is that the government now doesn't protect those who need. The government make people have to go to food banks now to get food. Just simple as that. And Cameron says it was a great idea. The Labour Party are posturing, in my opinion. They're saying, oh, I think it's a bad idea, but our councillors at that level will enforce this law. Maybe it is time the Labour Party stood up and said to the Tories, we oppose this. For example, like the bedroom tax, we oppose you convicting people who are just innocent people because of something that wasn't a crime last year, but you've made up a crime. The people don't have enough money to pay this bill because of the way society is at the moment.
But these things go through Parliament. Labour votes against them, doesn't it, in Parliament, all these changes?
I don't know.
Well, there was a parliamentary majority, so even if every Labour MP had voted against the bedroom tax legislation, and as far as my recollection goes, they didn't, but even if the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats would have swamped it through, there is a public desire to punish the poor. It's interesting that John mentioned food banks, when nearly every government minister who's talked about food banks has blamed the poor for needing them. Saying it's a supply problem. If there were less food banks, there'd be less people needing them. And that's just not true. It's the welfare reforms and the inept way that they've been installed. It's the punishing people for having lived in the same home for years and years and built a community around them. And so their kids move out. But that's their family home. And grandchildren go to stay with their grandma. I have one client, very, very vulnerable, and she looks after her kids whose parents are going through a particularly messy divorce, and they cannot be classed as normally resident with her. So she is being penalised for looking out for her family, and that's something that you or I or any of us would see as a moral duty. And it's something that this government and some parts of the Labour Party have no problem with.
How much is this affecting minority ethnic groups and others, including Muslims, for example?
I know that around 60% of our client group are from Muslim communities, and they are being very severely affected because of the very close-knit family units there are, because of the very large and sort of widely spread family units there are. I have clients. For a Muslim man to say this is my cousin is maybe very different for if I say that, but they are just as genuinely a cousin, and we are seeing families being ripped apart and thrown to every part of this country and every part of the city. And there are some communities, for instance, I believe Kosovan Albanians, very often they're Muslim, they are predominantly based within Westminster and West London. To move different parts of that community to different parts of London will destroy the only Kosovan Albanian community in Britain.
And that's because of the housing benefit cut.
And that's because of housing benefit cuts.
They're being pushed to the margin.
And also the bedroom tax, and also the welfare reforms, and also the cut to council tax benefit. There are so many different ways.
It's interesting because I remember Boris Johnson 2 years ago said we don't want Kosovo-style ethnic cleansing in London.
Exactly.
But it's happening.
Exactly. And Boris, for some of his charms, is always very keen to say something shocking and to say something that's particularly outrageous to grab a headline. He has done nothing to stop this. If we talk about political will, his plan for house building in London, something that's genuinely needed, where's that gone? I see no new homes being built. I see no new homes being built for young families, for people who are just starting out in the job market from university or school. I have too many clients. If you're under 35, we have a project which deals exclusively in housing homeless people. And if you're under 35, it is next to impossible to claim adequate housing benefit for you to live anywhere. And when you look at the shared accommodation rate, it's astonishing, the disrepair, the horrible properties.
Why is it so difficult if you're under 35?
Because if you're under 35, supposedly you need less rent to rent a house or a home or a flat. It doesn't matter if you've got kids and a partner yourself. It's just, that's the way the government has set the bar. Much as minimum wage, supposedly when you get to 25, your cost of living rise. It's just arbitrary, and that's the problem with too many of these reforms.
Well, Jon, let me come to you on this whole issue of the Kosovo-style ethnic cleansing and gentrification. I mean, is it partly because more middle-class people are moving into these inner London areas and pushing out the poorer people?
That certainly could be one way of saying it. People will move to wherever houses are, and it's a wee bit sad. I mean, for example, in Brixton, there's all these Yuppies Out campaign, which is kind of funny. You know, let's get the, people will move. That's the nature of it. But the councils are not building social housing that local people can afford to rent or live in. They're building houses that are £360,000 to buy, that those that are on a better income than other people will be able to afford.
And are landlords increasingly kicking out tenants in order to sell the house to a single family that's quite well off?
I do think it's a very simple solution to the housing crisis is squat the lot.
Squat the lot.
Squat the lot. For example, today Southwark Council, or a few days ago, sold a property for 2.96 million because they're going to build 20 council houses. At the moment, that is housing 8 people. 8 people have got a house tonight, and maybe tomorrow 20 people have a house, because that's actually council property. You know, why shouldn't people live there, use that space? I think it's a whole mismanagement from government down to local level, that we view homes, you know, where people come from, you know, the whole community, we now view that as a commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. If you want to live where your parents lived, you need quite a lot more money than your parents did, because you can't afford to live there. If you're lucky, well, God forbid your father and mother pass on, you might get living in their house, but you won't if it's a council house, because you're kicked out. You're not on the tenancy, you're not on the lease. I mean, under the bedroom tax, I know of circumstances where people's mothers passed on just a few weeks ago, and they were hit with a bedroom tax bill for the empty bedroom in their house. How callous. And that's also a Labour council. You know, it's telling, I think. You read a statement at the very start, a statement from Southwark Council. That's 3 weeks old. Southwark Council couldn't be bothered, and I know your researchers try to contact them to respond to what we're trying to say to them. I think their silence says it all. They're wrong, and they're ashamed to admit it, because...
Well, I'm told that they did actually issue a second statement. It wasn't just the one we read out.
Oh, let's
so they
hear
did
that
come back
one.
with something.
Well, my chief executive wrote to the the leader of the council for Southwark, asking for a response to the very heavy-handed and intimidating way that they handled the people who turned up at court, and in the lead-up, not turning up to advice sessions, not correctly advising council taxpayers of their rights, of their access to discretionary funding, and we've yet to receive a response. Even a thank you for your letter, but we've already given a statement. They don't want to engage.
Well, it was 2 weeks ago that this court business happened. happened since then? Have some people been given these liability orders, or have bailiffs gone to some places?
We don't know about the people who've received liability orders and didn't turn up, because obviously we have no contact with them, but I would very safely assume that they do have liability orders in their name. And one of the strangenesses about council tax is to get a liability order against someone costs a few pence. To actually issue one directly to each person, if someone requests one, I know of a case where they requested their liability order and they were told that it would cost them £500 for a single piece of paper that had cost a few pence to put through the courts.
Why is it secret, the paper?
It's not secret. It's another money-making scheme for, in this case, Haringey Council. And that also is a Labour council. There are many, many problems with council tax, and one of the main problems that we see is how disproportionately it is applied to people. If you live in the right part of town, there will be a softly approach. If you live in the wrong part of town, in the wrong postcode, you'll be slapped with the liability order, and there'll be a bailiff on your front door threatening you, threatening your family, and threatening your possessions.
Do you really think that Haringey is trying to make money by charging £500?
I think all councils would do exactly the same.
Has anybody paid the £500? Not making much money if nobody pays. I mean, it sounds absurd. Nobody could pay.
No one could pay, but that's what they want. They want to keep it all secret. They want to pretend that even the summons to court is a genuine legal document, and it's not. It's issued by the council to the residents, and the court doesn't know how many people are turning up on the day, how many summons have been issued for that day, and they have no idea what the liability is.
Well, Labour did some research saying 156,000 people have been summoned under this non-payment of council tax thing. Is that? Do you think that figure is correct?
I think that's probably an underestimation, if anything. I can't speak for the research, but I think it would probably be a lot more. There are, I think, 19,000 people in Southwark borough alone who have never paid council tax before, who are being issued with summonses, of which 4,500 were part of the block that went forward on Friday a couple of weeks ago. And
do you think the next step is that they will send bailiffs to some of these people?
Absolutely. As an anti-poverty charity, Zaccheaus 2000 is dealing with a lot of bailiff cases, and I can honestly tell you, the bailiff cases are the most harrowing casework I deal with. There are cases of people assaulting single parents, of people assaulting people with very severe mental and physical health problems, people forcing their way in, breaking doors down even though they don't have the right unless it's a court fine. I would honestly say to any viewer, if you are having problems with bailiff, seek legal advice, seek debt advice. There are so many ways to deal with this.
So if somebody knocks at the door, unless they've actually can show you that it's for non-payment of a court fine, they cannot come in?
Yeah, pretty much. Our advice to our clients is do not open the door, tell them you're seeking advice, tell them you're willing to make payments, but do not let them in. If they get into your property, they can remove items, even if they're disbarred from taking those items through the national standards for debt collection. We've had people had their fridge freezers, their cookers taken away.
We'll have to stop. I'm sorry on that, but on that good advice to people what to do if somebody does knock on the door at any time of the day or night. Thank you very much indeed, Nick and John. And let me just say that the Royal Charter on Press Regulation went before the Privy Council earlier today. Due to the importance of this for the future of journalism in the UK, after the break, we'll be repeating a previous debate we held on the Royal Charter, hosted by John Rees. So stay with us.